The smell hit you first. Not the warm, yeasty comfort of familiar bread, but something earthier, almost medicinal. Across occupied Europe in the early 1940s, women bent over wooden work tables grinding dried acorns into coarse powder, their hands stained brown from tannins, their eyes carrying the quiet calculation of people who had learned to see food where others saw forest floor debris. This was not cooking as nourishment. This was cooking as survival, sheer human will refusing to yield to scarcity. Welcome to Fieldcraft Chronicles. Today we step inside the forgotten laboratories of the wartime home kitchen, where ordinary people practiced an extraordinary, desperate science that kept families alive when civilization's supply chains had completely collapsed. The acorn and the ancient knowledge. Long before the war reduced Europe to foraging its own woodlands, acorns had fed human civilizations for millennia. What the 1940s housewife rediscovered, out of desperate necessity, was knowledge buried beneath centuries of agricultural abundance. In Germany, the Mediterranean, and rural France, families harvested acorns in autumn with the urgency their Iron Age ancestors once had. The process demanded patience that hunger made agonizing. Raw acorns are bitter with tannins, astringent enough to pucker the mouth, and genuinely toxic in quantity. Harvested acorns were shelled, crushed, and submerged in cold water for days, changed repeatedly as it darkened. When the water finally ran clear, the meal was dried and ground into coarse, faintly sweet flour. The bread it produced was dense and dark, crumbling rather than slicing, but it delivered real nutrition, potassium, calcium, and healthy fats that kept bodies functioning when everything else had failed. The dark edge when bread stopped being food. Then there were the places where even acorns were a luxury. In German-occupied territories by 1944, documented accounts emerge of bread extended with sawdust, cellulose pulp, and agricultural chaff. When a family's weekly grain ration amounted to just a handful of flour, the imperative to make it appear like more became, well, overwhelming. Sawdust, added bulk, created the sensation of a full loaf, something solid on the table that looked like bread. The stomach felt full. The body received almost nothing. This slow starvation masquerading as sustenance left people weak and malnourished long after liberation. This was not ingenuity. It was tragedy wearing ingenuity's clothing. The British kitchen creativity under constraint. Not every wartime kitchen operated at that extreme. In Britain, where rationing was tight but supply chains held, a different domestic fieldcraft emerged, disciplined creativity rather than desperation. Roasted dandelion roots became coffee substitutes. Carrots replaced rationed sugar in cake batters. Potato starch stretched flour supplies without catastrophic consequence. The government-endorsed Walton pie, root vegetables under a humble pastry crust, fed millions and became an unlikely symbol of national resilience. These kitchens were practicing genuine fieldcraft, reading available resources, understanding their properties, and applying knowledge to sustain life under pressure. What the wartime kitchen teaches the modern survivalist. The 1940s domestic kitchen collapsed the boundary between food and the natural world, forcing an entire generation to develop botanical literacy, patience, and practical processing knowledge that modern life has quietly eroded. The lesson is not to stockpile sawdust. The lesson is that the gap between abundance and scarcity can close with terrifying speed, and those who survive it most effectively already hold practical knowledge, who know which wild plants their region produces, how to process them safely, and how to maintain household discipline when the familiar world falls away. The fire still burns. Every loaf of dense acorn bread pulled from a wartime oven was a declaration. Every stretched ration was an act of agency in a world that had stripped agency away. That spirit, resourceful, adaptive, undefeated, is exactly what Fieldcraft Chronicles exist to honor and teach. Subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with the history lovers, preppers, and bushcraft students in your life. The past has more to teach us than we have yet been willing to learn.